The summer heat pressed down like a furnace, the kind of sweltering air that made even the cicadas sound exhausted. I'd just moved into the neighborhood 2 weeks prior, quietly, without fanfare. My work didn't allow much time for introductions, and truth be told, I preferred it that way. The house was more than I had ever planned to own, but after years of sacrifice and long hours building my business, I decided I deserved peace. Peace, however, wasn't something the Homeowners Association allowed for long. The first time I saw her, she was marching down the sidewalk with a clipboard and a wide-brimmed sun hat, barking at some poor teenage boy about bicycle violations. Her voice was shrill, her face tight with the sort of authority no one had actually given her. Everyone around referred to her, in whispers, as Karen. She seemed to thrive on confrontation, and within days I understood that she considered herself the queen of this community. I kept my distance. I didn't buy this place to play HOA games. I'd chosen the house for its quiet location, the access to the walking trails, and, yes, the swimming pool, a sprawling complex the community shared. Swimming had always been my form of meditation. One late afternoon, I decided to finally take advantage of the pool. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky orange and violet. The water shimmered, calling me in. I slipped inside, letting the coolness wash the weight of the week off me. I had just started my laps when the inevitable sound came, heels clacking on pavement, the sharp voice slicing through the evening air. "What do you think you're doing in there?" I turned, pushing my wet hair back, and found her glaring down at me like I'd broken into her private estate. Karen's sun hat nearly shaded her entire face, but her narrowed eyes glowed with fury. "Swimming," I said simply. "You don't belong here. Only registered community members are allowed to use this pool, and I haven't seen you at a single meeting. You're trespassing." I blinked, amused at her self-importance. "I live here. Bought the place 2 weeks ago." "Impossible," she snapped. "I know every single homeowner in this neighborhood. You must be renting. Renters don't get pool privileges unless approved by the HOA. Her voice had grown louder, drawing the attention of a few other residents. Some looked away, clearly used to her tirades. Others looked curious, almost entertained, like they were watching a play unfold. I stayed calm. "My name is David Carter. House on Maple Bend, number 17. Deeds in my name." Karen folded her arms. "Don't lie to me. If you think you can waltz in here and break our rules, you're in for a rude awakening. I run this community. We have standards." It was then that she pulled out her phone, dialing with exaggerated movements. "I'm calling the police. Let's see how you explain yourself to them. You people think you can just take what you want without following rules." The emphasis she put on "you people" didn't escape me. My jaw tightened. I'd encountered her type before. Small-minded, arrogant, drunk on the tiniest drop of power. I could have told her everything right then, could have ended the charade. But I didn't, because I already knew what she didn't. The HOA didn't own this pool anymore. A month before I moved in, I'd struck a quiet deal with the developer who still owned the community assets. For a price that made him grin ear to ear, I purchased the pool, the clubhouse, the tennis courts, every shared facility. He had grown tired of HOA politics, and I had grown tired of people like Karen. It was a match made in heaven. The paperwork was signed, sealed, and stamped. The deed was mine, but I hadn't told anyone yet. So, as she stood there screaming into the phone, I smiled to myself. When the police arrived, 10 minutes later, sirens silent, 2 officers walked through the gate. Karen rushed to them like she was greeting royalty.
"Officers, thank God you're here. This man is trespassing, refusing to leave. He's not authorized to be here, and I demand you remove him immediately. He's disturbing the peace." The officers looked at me, then at her. One of them, Officer Martinez, gave me a nod of recognition. "Evening, Mr. Carter. Enjoying the pool?" Karen froze. You know him?" "Of course," Martinez said. "We had a chat last week when he closed on the property. Congratulations again, sir." Her mouth fell open. "Closed on the property? What are you talking about? He doesn't own anything here. I run this community." I finally swam to the edge, pulling myself up onto the concrete. Water dripped from me, but my patience was dry as dust. I reached for the towel I'd brought, taking my time, watching her squirm. "Karen," I said, my tone calm but cutting, "you're mistaken. I didn't just buy a house here. I bought the building. The pool, the clubhouse, the courts, they belong to me now. You're standing on my property." The silence that followed was thick enough to drown in. The residents who had been lingering nearby gasped. A mother clutching her daughter's hand looked positively gleeful, like Christmas had come early. Karen, however, went pale. That's not possible. The HOA owns all community facilities. We voted on it." "No," I corrected. "The developer owned them, and he sold them. To me. Paperwork's filed with the county. You can check." The officers exchanged looks, trying not to smirk. Martinez gave me a nod of recognition. "All seems in order. No crime here. Have a good evening." They left her standing there, sputtering. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. I walked past her, towel slung over my shoulder. "From now on," I said, just loud enough for everyone to hear, "the rules around here are going to change, and you won't be the one making them." Her sun hat tilted as she staggered back, fury radiating off her, but powerless to stop me. That night, word spread like wildfire. By the next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. People stopped me on the sidewalks, at the mailbox, at the grocery store. Some congratulated me, some asked what it meant for them, and some simply smiled with relief. For years, Karen had lorded over them, nitpicking their grass height, threatening fines, humiliating people in meetings. And now she had been dethroned in a single evening. But what she didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. She was going to fight, claw, and scheme to regain her imaginary throne. And I was ready for her. Karen didn't take that night's humiliation lightly. By the following morning, her little army of clipboard warriors began circling the neighborhood like vultures. I noticed them in twos and threes, whispering on porches, snapping photos of people's lawns, and pretending their laminated badges meant anything. It was a last-ditch attempt to assert power, but I could see the panic in their eyes. They weren't fighting for the rules. They were fighting for Karen. Karen herself doubled down. The next HOA meeting was held in the clubhouse, and I attended for the first time, not as a neighbor, but as the man who owned the very floor they stood on. She strutted in like nothing had changed, her sun hat perched as if it were a crown. "Order, order," she barked, slapping her clipboard onto the podium. "Before we begin, I must address the dangerous misinformation being spread about certain individuals claiming ownership of community facilities. Let me be clear. This pool, this clubhouse, these courts belong to the HOA, and by extension, to me as your president." Murmurs filled the room. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, waiting for her to dig her own grave. One resident finally raised his hand. "But, Karen, the police said otherwise. They recognized Mr. Carter. He bought the property." "Lies," she shouted, her face turning red. "It's a trick, a fraud. He's manipulating you all."
That was my cue. I stood slowly, unfolding a neat folder from my bag. Inside were certified copies of the deeds, stamped and signed by the county recorder's office. The official seal glistened under the fluorescent lights. Actually, I said, my voice steady, here's proof. As of last month, I legally own this property, which means I decide who can and cannot use it. The papers passed from hand to hand. Gasps followed. A man in the back laughed under his breath. Karen's face drained of color. This isn't fair," she stammered. "You can't just waltz in here and take everything. I built this community." "No," I corrected, stepping closer to her podium. "You terrorize this community. You find people for the color of their curtains, for kids leaving bikes on porches, for planting the wrong flowers. You wielded power you never earned, and you crushed anyone who didn't bend. That ends now." The room erupted in applause, raw, desperate relief spilling from people who had lived under her thumb for years. Karen banged her clipboard against the table, but the sound was drowned out by the cheers. She stormed out, but I knew it wasn't over. Over the next weeks, she tried everything. She filed complaints with the county zoning office. She sent angry emails to residents, warning them not to fall for my lies. She even threatened lawsuits, though she had no grounds. I let her flail. Meanwhile, I quietly worked behind the scenes. I gathered the residents for a meeting of my own, this time without Karen's shrill interruptions. We met by the pool one warm evening, children splashing in the background, neighbors sitting in lawn chairs with drinks in hand. I laid out my plan. No more punitive HOA rules, no more fines for trivial nonsense. Instead, we'd focus on making the community welcoming again. I'd lower membership fees for the pool, allow families to host birthday parties at the clubhouse for free, and open the tennis courts for community events. The response was overwhelming. People clapped, laughed, even cried. They told stories of how Karen had humiliated them, demanding repainting for non-approved colors, finding a widow for planting daisies, threatening to tow cars for parking a few inches off. Now, those days were ending. But Karen wasn't done. She came at me one last time, her most desperate move yet. One Saturday morning, I woke to banging on my door. 2 county inspectors stood there, clipboards in hand. They'd received multiple complaints about health code violations at the pool. Serious concerns, they said. Someone had accused me of running unsafe facilities. I led them straight to the pool. The water sparkled. The filters hummed. Every safety requirement was spotless. I'd hired a professional crew weeks earlier to make sure of it. The inspectors checked everything twice, then smiled. "Frankly, this is one of the best-kept community pools we've ever seen," one of them said. "No violations here. But we'll note who filed these complaints. It seems someone is abusing the system." Karen had played her last card and lost. The next week, the county sent her a warning letter about filing false complaints. She disappeared from public view after that. No more sun hat, no more clipboard marches, no more shouting at children. The tyrant had fallen. Months later, I stood by the pool on a golden evening. Families laughed. A barbecue grill smoked nearby. Music drifted through the air. A little girl splashed into the deep end and came up giggling. The community was alive again, free from the chokehold of one woman's arrogance. A neighbor clapped me on the back. "David, you saved us from her. This place feels like home again." I smiled, watching the sunset reflect across the water. "No," I said quietly. "She just reminded me why I had to do it. Sometimes people like her think they own the world. The best revenge is showing them they never did." And with that, I dove into my pool, my water, my freedom, my peace. Karen never came back, but her downfall remained the story everyone told. The tale of how the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA called the cops on the wrong man, only to discover he owned her kingdom all along.